Evidence that corrupt and fraudulent processes are robbing him of an election victory.
Democrat officials never believed they could win this election honestly. I really believe that. That's why they did the mail-in ballots, where there's tremendous corruption and fraud going on.
And we'll hear from election analyst Casey Briggs as the vote count remains tight in several key swing states. Also ahead, the government seeks to confirm whether Australian exports of wine, coal and timber will be stopped from entering China. And billionaire miner Clive Palmer loses his High Court challenge to Western Australia's border closure. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Catherine Robinson. Well, the wait continues to find out who'll be the next president of the United States. Democratic challenger Joe Biden says he has no doubt he will be declared the winner when the count is over. As he gains ground on the president, Donald Trump has falsely claimed there's evidence of voter fraud in states where he's losing ground. So far, his attempts to stop counting have been unsuccessful, although his supporters have gathered to protest in several states, including outside voting centres in Pennsylvania, Nevada and Arizona. We will be crossing live to North America correspondent Catherine Diss shortly in Philadelphia. But first, let's get the latest on the numbers from analyst Casey Briggs. And Casey, can we start with Pennsylvania? Can you explain for us why now what indeed is key there now?
Well, we're watching Pennsylvania particularly at the moment because if Pennsylvania is won by Joe Biden, that's it, that's game over. Joe Biden can claim victory in the presidential race. If Donald Trump wins, he's still in the hunt, but there are several more states that he would need to win that he is currently behind in. So Joe Biden, as he closes the gap in Pennsylvania, would be watching these results closely. And it seems like, at the moment, that is the state that is most likely to be in a position where US TV networks will call it on the numbers that we're seeing. This margin 2 days ago was more than 14 or 15 points. Now it is at a 1% gap between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. 65,000 votes in it. That was more than 100,000 this morning. It is just shrinking as the votes come in, and we're yet to see votes from Philadelphia County in Pennsylvania, in the corner of the state, which are breaking very heavily for Joe Biden. So if that sort of trend continues, Joe Biden would take the lead. This is exactly what we expected on election day, and in the lead up to election day. These are all while the Trump family is alleging widespread voter fraud, there is no evidence really that they've presented for that, and this is exactly the blue shift that was predicted by the opinion polls, by the voter registration data. And it sort of sometimes needs to be said, the winner of an election is not declared until all of the votes that were legally cast have been counted, and at the moment those votes are tipping in Joe Biden's favour.
Now, Casey, we heard from Pennsylvania officials earlier today. Can you take us through the language regarding the timing of any results?
Well, we know there's sort of more than 300,000 votes as of this morning yet to be formally reported. At one point, the Secretary of State was quite hopeful that would be done tonight, US time, so today for us. Maybe that's a little less confident, but we are still seeing counties reporting. We may well be in a position today where the US networks decide they've seen enough and they can declare a result, or we might just need to wait for every single vote to be counted. It could be today, it could be later. We really don't know. We're in the whims of the Pennsylvania various county boards of election.
Let's move across the state. Now, we know that if Joe Biden keeps Arizona, Nevada could potentially clinch it for him. What's happening there?
Well, in Nevada, we're only getting really one update a day at the moment. Joe Biden is ahead, and in the update we got at 4 this morning, his lead blew out from about 8,000 votes to about 12,000 votes. The other thing that we know in Nevada is that most of the votes, the overwhelming majority, about 90% of them, remain in Clark County. Everywhere else has largely been counted. Clark County is where Las Vegas is and would probably favour Joe Biden. But because we're looking at what is still a relatively relatively tight margin there in terms of just actual numbers of votes. None of the US networks have called it. You would think that Joe Biden at this point would remain the favourite, but a little bit more counting there to be done.
And just finally on Georgia, we know that Trump can't win the White House without taking Georgia. Most of the counting has been done there, but what's the latest?
Yeah, there's not very many votes left. I think it's less than 20,000, but this has been a rapid tightening through the course of today. 0.07% is the gap, and it's less than 4,000 votes that are coming in. What's been happening again, it's the urban areas, it's the very Democratic-leaning areas in places like Atlanta that have been breaking in Joe Biden's favour. That that gap has been narrowing. We're continuing to watch the returns as they come in. Joe Biden is looking good there. But as I said, he only really needs to win one or maybe two of these states if Arizona were to go the other way, and he's, at the presidency already. This one may well go to a recount because that margin is quite tight. I still think Pennsylvania is Joe Biden's, well, for those that are waiting on a quick result, Pennsylvania is the quickest way there.
OK, Casey, stay with us. We'll check back in with you later in the program. Thank you. Well, as the vote count continues in Pennsylvania, as Casey just mentioned, let's go now to Catherine Diss in the state's largest city of Philadelphia. Catherine, we know that tensions are building there. The President Trump has spoken, as well as Donald Trump Jr. in the last little while. What's the atmosphere like there?
Yeah, good afternoon, Catherine. Look, the scene's sort of rapidly changed behind me just in the last couple of minutes as you've been coming to me. There was very loud music playing. It was very jubilant. It was more like a block party here where a lot of the supporters for Count the Vote were dancing to music and singing. And a lot of the supporters of the President Donald Trump who were here earlier had dispersed and left. But now some of those people have now come back. Some of those counter-protesters have come back, and we're seeing some people gather around them just behind me. So it looks like tensions are again building here a bit, but for the most part it has been relatively peaceful. And as I said, a happy atmosphere where people are just simply calling on making sure all the ballots that have been cast are counted. Yes, Donald Trump spoke a short time ago. He made a lot of unsubstantiated claims about voter fraud with very little evidence. He spoke about the fact that the mail-in ballots, calling it amazing that the mail-in ballots were landing heavily in the Democrats' column. But of course we know that is not a surprise. He actively told his supporters to not trust the mail and to make sure that they voted in person. So that's most certainly not a surprise. Let's take a listen to what the President had to say.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech. As everybody saw, we won by historic numbers. And the pollsters got it knowingly wrong. They got it knowingly wrong.
Now, Catherine, we know that around 89% of the votes in Pennsylvania have been counted now, but exactly how is that count going? How's it progressing?
Well, we heard a short time ago from the Secretary of State here in Pennsylvania, who says that it is progressing. We're down to around 327,000 ballots to be counted. She spoke about the processes that they have in place. She said that they are unparalleled in terms of the legitimacy of the processes that they do abide by. She said that we never have a full count the day of the election or the week of the election, but it takes up to a month to make sure that all those counties are fully counted, and that they want to get us to a position in which we find out who has won or lost those counties. But she wanted to stress that we most certainly do not know the full vote count on the day, on the week, or until at least a month out from the election day. It's worth noting that Donald Trump has launched a number of legal challenges in regards to these mail-in ballots in a number of different states. They've been knocked back in Michigan and also in Georgia. The one here in Pennsylvania is still pending. It is a legitimate part of the democratic process of voting, so he's well within his rights to do that. But in terms of the substantiated claims that he's trying to make at the moment, there doesn't appear to be any sort of substantiated claims in regards to questions around those mail-in ballots. Let's take a listen to what the Secretary of State in Pennsylvania had to say.
What's happening now is having enough ballots counted to actually see who the winner is, right? The farther apart that is, the easier it is to tell. The overwhelming majority of ballots will be counted by Friday. I still think that we're ahead of the schedule, and we actually already have counted the overwhelming majority of ballots, but because it's a close race, it's not quite clear yet who the winner is.
Now, Catherine, we know that Joe Biden spoke even earlier today, calling for patience, calling for calm. Just how confident are the Democrats of victory?
Well, look, we heard from Joe Biden yesterday where he said that he was confident. Again, he came out today reiterating that message. He said that once all of the ballots are counted, that he was confident that he and Kamala Harris would be handed the White House, that they would be the winners of this election. So, again, very confident. They've been telling us this for a number of days now. The Democratic strategists say they've done the numbers, they've looked at the data, and they believe that they will overwhelmingly win the remaining of these mail-in ballots that are still to be counted. Here in Pennsylvania, he's currently winning those votes at a rate of around 78%. So that is relatively high, you would say. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
We have no doubt that when the count is finished, Senator Harris and I will be declared the winners. So I ask everyone to stay calm, all the people to stay calm. The process is working. The count is being completed, and we'll know very soon.
So that was Joe Biden there, just again calling for calm, asking people to be patient, to wait for those votes to be counted, and I suspect we may well have a result by tomorrow in regards to who has won this election.
Catherine Diss joining us from Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. Thank you. Well, for more now on how the result could affect Australia, political editor Andrew Probyn joins me now from Canberra. Andrew, we heard from President Trump earlier today, really doubling down on his comments around voter fraud, being this victim of corruption. Do you expect our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, to comment on what's playing out in the States, despite Scott Morrison being reluctant to do so up until now?
No, Catherine, I don't think you'll see anything from the Prime Minister or the Labor leader, Anthony Albanese, until we have a firm result in the United States. I mean, look at the comments today from Donald Trump, that he was using the language of a despot, not the leader of supposedly of the free world. It was very, very incendiary, dangerous language, and there's no reason for Australia to get involved at this stage. In fact, no good might come of it, and that's the calculation from the Prime Minister's office and elsewhere. This is something that we have to wait on, and there's no point criticising overtly or in an implied way his language or his tactics, because they are abhorrent, they are what we saw, they are shocking, and they are appalling. Australia has to sit by and be that ally that it has long been. Given also that whoever is eventually becomes victor in this contest, and it's likely to be Joe Biden, we're told, Donald Trump will remain president until the inauguration, which is 76 days away, Catherine.
Well, you mentioned that alliance that we've had with America for a long time. How would you characterise that relationship over the past years, both under Malcolm Turnbull and Scott Morrison?
Well, it stabilised, but it was tricky from the start. We saw in 2017 there was criticism from Donald Trump of the asylum seeker deal that Malcolm Turnbull had struck with Barack Obama. Donald Trump said it was the worst deal ever. Malcolm Turnbull managed to rescue that deal, but it was a close-run thing. That conversation, remember, was leaked to the US media. Now, later on, a year later, there was another problem when it came to trade. The United States has had a trade war with China. It slapped tariffs on steel and aluminium, and it looked for a short period that Australia would be caught up with those tariffs. And Australia had to remind Donald Trump and those around him that a deal had been struck inside a communications pod on the sidelines of the Hamburg G20 in 2017 that would exempt Australia from those tariffs. So it has been up and down. Donald Trump has treated sometimes the leaders like Putin and Xi and also Kim with more respect than his own allies. But Australia has managed to stable that relationship with the United States, and the relationship between Scott Morrison and Donald Trump looked pretty strong last year and has remained so ever since.
So then, Andrew, how could the relationship shift if Joe Biden takes the White House, particularly with respect to trade and the TPP?
Well, under Trump, America has become a lot more inward. It has been isolationist. It has withdrawn itself from a lot of those multilateral organisations, be they trade or health. He's going to withdraw from the World Health Organization, for example. Now, Australia's instinct has always been to be engaged and increase engagement in those institutions. Scott Morrison, albeit has criticised the World Trade Organization in the way it treats China. But under Joe Biden, should he win, which is expected both here and in the States clearly, there would be a lot more engagement with the world on a couple of fronts, not only on climate change, which is a very, very big one, because on climate change, remember, Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Accord. It looks like Joe Biden would re-engage the United States in that process. That could put pressure on Australia to increase its targets, and there will be a lot more engagement, one would expect, in a more traditional sense from a Joe Biden president in other aspects of world engagement, be they the World Health Organization, the WTO and the like. I think we can expect, though, that Joe Biden will have a protectionist underpinning, more so than he might have been before the 2016 election. The American first attitude that Donald Trump brought to the American presidency might still exist, even if Joe Biden is president, but the language will be a lot more familiar to Australia and other US allies.
And just briefly before we go, Andrew, how do you think Joe Biden would approach China? Would his position on them be less tough, more tough than Donald Trump's?
There is an anxiety in Australia and also among America's allies that China might seek to test a Biden presidency early on, be that in the South China Sea or elsewhere closer to Taiwan. But there's no doubt that the US establishment has as a whole, got a lot stronger with China, and that would continue, one would expect, even under a Biden presidency. However, Joe Biden does want to strike a pact in a global sense on climate change. If he does want to pursue climate change as one of his key agendas, then clearly he'll want to get China involved. Now, if that means the US being less confrontational with China, then that could isolate Australia's hard line on China that we've seen in the months and years ahead. So there's a lot of things that will change if Joe Biden becomes president, because if you do change the presidency, you do change the world, and this could be one of those key moments in modern history.
Indeed it may be. Andrew Probyn, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
To other news now, the Victorian Government will begin mapping out its plan to allow international arrivals, with an interim report into the state's hotel quarantine system to be released today. It comes as Victoria records no new coronavirus cases or deaths for a 7th straight day. Reporter Stephanie Ferrier joins me now from Melbourne. Hi Steph, more happy news for Victorians today.
Good afternoon, Catherine. Yes, indeed, with the 7th consecutive day, as you say, of 0 new cases and 0 deaths. So our death toll here remains unchanged at 819. That also drops our metropolitan Melbourne 14-day rolling average down to 1.3. We have just 2 mystery cases. We also have seen a fall in the number of active cases in metropolitan Melbourne, down to now just 15. There are none at all in regional Victoria, and we have just 2 people still in hospital. The Premier, Daniel Andrews, says this comes off the back of some really impressive test numbers, more than 18,500 tests. And he says while we do have to keep our guard up because 7 days of zeros does not equal a vaccine, it is a testament to the commitment and vigilance of Victorians. And he says it does mean that we are on track for some really exciting changes to those restrictions this weekend.
This Sunday we'll make really significant announcements about taking further steps around 25Ks, Ring of Steel with regional Victoria, some expansions in different settings, whether it's bars, restaurants, cafes, and we'll also map out for Victorians what the rest of November looks like. Some further steps we hope to take a couple of weeks after this Sunday.
So Steph, what has Dan Andrews also said about allowing international travellers back into Melbourne?
Yes, well, he's made some comments on 2 fronts. The first is the quarantine program and a resetting of that. As we speak, at the moment, an interim report from the Hotel Quarantine Inquiry is being tabled in State Parliament, and the Premier says that he will carefully consider those recommendations and then use them to reset this program to ensure that guests and staff can't seed any further outbreaks into the general community. He does say that he wants to do that safely rather than quickly, and he has said that the commitment remains that he wants Melburnians to be able to enjoy Christmas returning from international ports with their families by Christmas. And on the other issue is the fact that he is looking at opening up flights from New Zealand. So this will happen as of Monday, and this will mean that direct flights will come in. He has written to the Prime Minister this morning, he says, to confirm this. And while we have been part of that New Zealand travel bubble inadvertently, of course, because we do have open interstate borders, this will allow New Zealanders to now come in through the front door.
Stephanie, great to talk to you about some what is seemingly positive news. Stephanie Ferrier joining us from Melbourne. Well, New South Wales has recorded 4 new locally acquired cases today. 1 is under investigation, while the other 3 are close contacts of that case. There were 5 cases reported among returned travellers in hotel quarantine. More than 17,000 people were tested in the reporting period. Billionaire miner Clive Palmer has lost his High Court challenge to Western Australia's hard border. The mining magnate had argued the restrictions breached the Constitution. Reporter Elizabeth Byrne joins me now from the High Court in Canberra. Hi Elizabeth, do we know the reasoning behind this decision?
Well, the court hasn't given its reasons yet, but it's given a fairly comprehensive result. Clive Palmer wanted the state's Emergency Management Act and the directions to close the borders that were made under that act ruled unconstitutional, and the court said this morning there's no constitutional breach at all, and so he's lost this case after a 2-day hearing earlier in the week.
And what will this mean for the way that the states manage the coronavirus spread?
Well, the thing is, the states had lined up behind Western Australia to support their case because they're all very worried about how they go on managing this crisis. And they really needed a ruling that would give them some certainty, and they will have taken heart from today's ruling. But there's no one as happy about the ruling as the West Australian Premier.
This is a victory for the people of this state, and it's a big win for all the people of Australia. The borders have proved to be essential to protect the health and welfare of the people of Western Australia, and indeed the health and welfare of the people of Australia. We put the borders in place for the right reasons, to protect the health of the people of this state and therefore ensure that our state could continue to function and we could continue to have great health and economic outcomes.
And Elizabeth, there's been a development with a Victorian case challenging lockdown laws?
Yes, that's right. This was a case about people not being able to move within a state rather than between states. And it was being argued that there's an implied right to freedom of movement in the Constitution. And that began today. It was being argued by George Pell's lawyer, Brett Walker. But just a few minutes ago, the court decided to throw it out and agreed with the Victorian government's assessment that there was no such implied freedom, certainly under this case. So I guess that's it for today on that.
A busy day nonetheless. Elizabeth Byrne, thank you. Australian exporters responsible for $6 billion worth of trade are watching nervously today as they expect produce, including wine and rock lobster, will be blocked by Chinese customs. National Rural reporter Kath Sullivan joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Hi, Kath. Can you take us through the latest in this development?
Well, there's a lot of sitting, waiting and watching that's actually going on at the moment as Australian exporters wait to see if their importers were correct when they said that they'd been told by officials in China to end contracts and stop purchasing from Australian customers across about 6 commodities. You mentioned rock lobster and wine there, barley, timber are other ones, as well as coal and copper. And those bans, we believe, are coming into effect today with Chinese customs expected to block any shipments or some shipments, we don't know to what degree, to what extent, from today. But irrespective of what happens, we're really getting a sense that the trade is incredibly nervous, that there's a lot of people very uncertain about what is going on. And in some ways, that risk that has entered the marketplace has just about been as effective as these suspensions, whether they come through or not.
Along with the uncertainty, what else are exporters and farmers telling you?
Well, we've heard that there are wine exporters who, one exporter had a shipment, I understand, just about loaded and ready to go out of South Australia this week. They've now unloaded that, keeping that wine here on shore just to wait and see what happens. Fishermen aren't taking their boats out. And we know that there were Austrade officials in Beijing who provided a briefing to Australian exporters late yesterday where they were pretty much told that we understand that importers have been told not to buy these things. We think that you should be looking to hedge your bets and find other markets. This could get a hell of a lot worse before it gets better. So certainly some very anxious people in the trade and a lot of frustration too over the government's handling of it, trying to determine whether we've taken the best track.
There's a lot at stake, up to $6 billion that we're hearing in exports there. Kath Sullivan, thank you.
Thanks.
Taking you to some breaking news now, and an interim report into Victoria's hotel quarantine program has officially been released. It has suggested the state should use a combination of improved hotel and home-based quarantine for return travellers, with the Andrews government urged to consider using electronic monitoring for people quarantining at home. It says any model needs to have clear lines of ministerial responsibility and must have a public health focus. Police are recommended to have a 24/7 presence at all hotel quarantine facilities. The report also urges better communication between Victorian and federal officials, including the sharing of information about arriving passengers. Well, Kosovo's former president is in detention in The Hague, where he will face charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Hashim Taci resigned today after he was accused of intimidation, mistreatment and violence against opponents. Taci was a guerrilla leader during Kosovo's war for independence from Serbia during the 1990s. A storm has brought torrential rains and catastrophic flooding to Central America, killing at least 18 people. Storm Eta struck Nicaragua as a Category 4 hurricane earlier this week before weakening as it moved over neighbouring Honduras. Homes, roads and bridges have been damaged and people have had to be pulled to safety from waist-high flood water. A quick look at the national weather details now. Sunny in Brisbane today, wind easing and partly cloudy in Sydney. It'll be most